researcher at Radboud University in the Netherlands, and I co-host this particular side event as a part of 3 projects achieved by Biochem4 in Canada. If you want to learn more about these projects, I will also give you links at the end of this presentation. Our session responds to a growing call for integrated approaches that connect climate, biodiversity, and social justice. These nature-based climate actions are gaining attention, but we need to ensure high integrity and inclusiveness, and these remain crucial. And as we move to COP30 in Berlin, our event echoes the vision of the global multilateral expressed by the COP presidency and the high-level champions as a vision to cooperate and to put nature, climate, and people at the center of international climate and nature action. I'm then delighted to instead now introduce my dear colleague Ido Boran, who is professor at York University, to speak about the importance of high integrity action and the promise of integrated nature climate action, and how maybe a joint program under the Rio Conventions could strengthen coherence across climate, biodiversity, and desertification governance.
Thank you, Sander. Thank you, Sander, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It is a pleasure to welcome you and our panelists to this important discussion on the role of high integrity climate action for nature and for people. Friends, over 30 years ago, the world came together in Rio to launch 3 major conventions on biodiversity, on climate, and on combating desertification. These are known as the Rio Conventions. And today, as we look ahead at COP30 in Brazil, the urgency to connect these 3 strands is clearer than ever. Isolated action is not effective. We need integrated action. And this is where the promise of integrated nature climate actions lies. We need stronger integrated action that protects the climate, restores ecosystems, and supports communities around the world. The good news is more than 2/3 of the nationally determined contributions, NDCs, now mention nature, and the numbers are rising. But the first global stocktake gave us a sobering reality check as well. The world is not even close to meeting the targets, to being on track. Now, government policy matters. It is among the most important policy framework, and it is crucial for getting us to where we need to be. But government action needs to be matched by actions at all levels, from cities and regions, from civil society to indigenous peoples and local communities, whose rights and leadership must be central to transformation. At Biochem4, our international research consortium, we are working to map and understand what high-quality nature climate action looks like on the ground. And we do this in collaboration with Achieve, the project that Sander will speak more about in a moment. In our work, in the work that we do with our partners, we are deeply aware that context matters. Each region, each community faces its own challenges and opportunities in implementation. And that is why we work closely with local partners in multiple regions to understand the context-specific complexities and realities that impact implementation and that can strengthen the implementation. Today, we have an exquisite line of panelists who will speak closely to these different experiences and insights. And from multiple regions to understand the context-specific complexities, and together we co-develop for scaling up and for drawing lessons that can inform the global process on climate change, on biodiversity, and on combating desertification. Speaking of which, we are also exploring, as Sandra has also mentioned, how stronger alignment between the Rio Conventions can be achieved in order to have policy coherence, so that the implementation is not duplicated, so there are no trade-offs, or at least those trade-offs are addressed. And so what is crucially important is that we need policy coherence and alignment of implementation across the three agendas through some kind of work, a joint work that could be done, and there's also some momentum in that regard between the climate change, biodiversity, and desertification conventions. Because, friends, in the end, high integrity action is not just a technical goal. It is a political and moral imperative. Let's seize the moment then and work together to strengthen and scale up high integrity actions for climate, for nature, and for people. Thank you for being here, and I pass it over back to Sandra.
Thank you, Idil. Before we move on to our excellent panel and also the late opening remarks by the high-level champions team, I would like to briefly set the scene for you, give a short overview of our ongoing work where we draw lessons from more than 10 years of non-state and subnational climate action in and around the context of the UNFCCC. Now, to draw these lessons, we make use of the Nature and Climate Cooperative Database, which by some means it's the largest climate action database that at least I know of. We record over 140,000 actor engagements, and we are also currently developing a sub-data set with over 120 initiatives that integrate climate and nature action, where we also connect, for instance, with satellite data to understand the impacts of these cooperative initiatives. So I promised you some lessons over the last 10 years, and maybe the first lesson I would like to share with you is don't let cooperation peak and fade. Over the last 10 years, we have seen many initiatives launched around the UNFCCC COPs, also at SBs and at climate summits. There we see all this concentration of launches of initiatives around high-profile political moments. But political momentum is not enough, and without lasting support, cooperative climate action risks to become very episodic. It waxes and wanes. The second lesson I would like to share with you is that widening participation means addressing structural imbalances. High-income country-based actors continue to dominate participation, and we've been seeing this over 10 years now, while low-income and vulnerable groups remain vastly underrepresented. And related to this lesson, our third lesson is that inclusiveness should extend to decision-making power. leadership in these mostly multi-stakeholder initiatives often remains with North-based NGOs, businesses, and academia. And South-based, and especially indigenous and locally led initiatives, remain rare among initiatives that are launched and recognized in the UNFCCC process. Our fourth lesson of the last 10 years of cooperative climate action is that nature-based climate action does offer a pathway to a more inclusive form of implementation. These initiatives implement more evenly across developed and developing countries than other types of climate action, which suggests the potential for more equitable benefits. And finally, cooperative ambition must be met with actual implementation. Since 2018, we see a stagnating performance among cooperative initiatives that are recognized by the UNFCCC. Our findings even show a slightly decreasing likelihood that cooperative initiatives deliver on their promises. So, maybe to conclude, the COP30 presidency has a great opportunity, and with their global Multi-Rauw campaign, they can benefit from 10 years of lessons on the engagement of cooperative initiatives in and around the UNFCCC. And one way is to rebalance who leads climate action, moving away from mere participation to shared leadership. To support the global stocktake, the global Multi-Rauw campaign can also sustain long-term cooperation, help sustain long-term cooperation, and help initiatives move from mere pledges to higher ambition and actual impact, especially in nature-based action in underserved regions. So, with this in mind, we will move into our panel discussion, which brings together very diverse perspectives from Africa, Latin America, and the global governance research field. Idil, over to you.
Thank you, Sander. I moderate the panel, and let me begin by introducing our panelists. I'm going to begin from the far end and introduce towards me, and I am delighted to introduce you to Fidel Ruziga-Dekfe from the Greater Virunga Transboundary Collaboration based in Kigali, Rwanda. Fidel, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Then we have Andrea Zabora from Katie, that is an agriculture research and education center based in Costa Rica, Turrialba, Costa Rica, and Andrea, welcome to our panel. Our next panelist is Johannes Atella from the Africa Research Impact Network based in Nairobi, and welcome to our panel, Johannes. And then, last but not least, I'm pleased to introduce you to Hannah Hughes from the Aberystwyth University, and welcome to our panel, Hannah. So, I'm going to ask 2 rounds of questions, and while we are waiting for high-level climate champion guest from the high-level climate champion office campaign. So, let me begin by asking a question to Fidel. Fidel, within the work that is done at the Greater Virunga Transboundary Collaboration, how are the nature-based climate action or nature-climate joint actions mainstreamed, and what kind of support are most needed regionally to scale up
Thank you very much, Professor Adil. Let me start by introducing actually my institution, the Greater Virunga Transboundary Collaboration. This is an institution that has been set up 15 years ago to streamline and to spearhead the transboundary collaboration in a landscape, unique landscape in Africa called the Greater Virunga landscape. This is a landscape that is shared between 3 countries of Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda. It's a unique landscape because it has a number of protected areas, 9 of them, and they are unique in terms of biodiversity conservation, and those protected areas are disseminated along shared boundaries of those 3 countries. Much as these countries have a lot of differences in terms of policies, in terms of practices, in terms of activities, but they are actually one unique feature, which is actually conservation. At least the conservation is bringing them together, is bridging these differences, and is helping actually them to come together for one common goal, sustainable conservation of these protected areas, and particularly one species which is unique in that area and unique in the world, the mountain gorillas. I think you've heard about the mountain gorillas history, how they, at the beginning, they were getting very less and less in terms of numbers, but today you are actually celebrating the successes in this conservation because they have been lifted from being critically endangered to endangered using the IUCN scale. So the transboundary collaboration started actually to bring these initiatives together, and it started from the grassroots, from the needs of the communities, from the needs of this conservation, particularly the needs for sustaining the conservation of this mountain gorilla species, and it grew until it became a fully-fledged institution. And today we have this institution called GVTC, the Greater Virunga Transboundary Collaboration, with a governance system, with a structure, as a fully-fledged institution, and being governed by a treaty signed by the 3 countries. Although there are so many differences, as I mentioned, but at least this has made the countries to be together and to really work together for this particular cause of conservation and communities as well. So GVTC as an institution is striving actually to make sustainable work for the conservation, and central to this conservation are the people. We conserve not only mountain gorillas and other species, but also to make sure that the communities around this national park are also recognized in terms of their needs, and these parks actually serve, benefit them, bring them revenues as well in different ways, through revenue sharing programs and through other activities that actually can benefit the communities. So we think that NBCA, the nature-based climate actions, is actually a very interesting concept because it brings together, it's actually helping us to make even more meaningful the action we are doing in terms of conservation. We want to be able to, that conservation benefits not only the species but also the communities, and there is no better way actually to integrate these 3 streams of activity other than putting them into a concept like nature-based climate and action. be able to deliver on conservation, biodiversity. We want to be able to really to show the meaning, how we address climate change, and not to make sure that we also bring the people at the forefront of this integrated. And this concept of nature-based is actually arrived. It has arrived on the right time to help us to conceptualize this integration we are doing. And as I mentioned, people are central to the work we do. We have, for example, in GBTC governance, a pillar which is based on community conservation. And this community conservation will help us actually to bring issues related to communities, how the communities perceive the work we do, and what are the needs of the communities that should be taken into consideration when we are doing the activities. So central to us are the communities, and we would like actually to use this concept to continue delivering on those three fronts as I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you for the very insightful experiences from the greater transboundary collaboration. My next question now is to Andrea, and Andrea, based on the work of Katia, how do landscape-based approaches contribute to measurable outcomes? Over to you.
Well, in our experience in Central America, landscape-based approaches, we focus mainly in key elements, in three key elements, in a co-development process, in understanding the local context, like Fidel was telling us, and also with a strategy of scaling up, this approach. So first, for us, it's very important to make a participatory co-development process that will include local communities, governments, institutions, and also all the different organizations that work in the different landscapes. And this helps us to ensure that actions reflect local knowledge, priorities, and realities. Also, in this co-development process, it's very important to include a multi-sectoral analysis and also multi-scale logic. This means with multi-sector analysis that we are looking how to agriculture, biodiversity, water, infrastructure, and tourism are well interconnected across rural landscapes. And with a multi-scale logic, we try to connect community-level actions with the strategies at the landscape and regional levels and align with national goals. And then for understand the concept, we analyze the socio-ecological system and how we can understand people depend on the ecosystem and other ecosystems, and how depend their livelihoods on these systems. And how also we analyze how the different climate hazards or the different pressures are affecting them. And then for support this, we combine local traditional knowledge with geospatial analysis to understand ecosystem services, flows, landscape connectivity, and where nature-based solutions can make the biggest difference. So for the scale up, we are looking integrating these local level approaches into planning and monitoring systems. This means developing metrics to track how nature-based solutions contribute to the ecosystem services and how they support both adaptation and mitigation. So in our experience, for like Idil and Fidel was told us, the center is the community, understand how communities evolve with the different sectors and how the livelihoods depends on the different ecosystems that we have in the different landscapes.
Thank you, Andrea. Very insightful, and indeed the focus on communities runs through all the examples that we've heard from Fidel and from you. And now my question is to Johannes. Johannes, based on Arin's experience, what reforms are needed to integrate climate and biodiversity in the African context, in particular for responding to context-specific needs and priorities? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, ARIN is a network working in 36 African countries. We're based in Nairobi. We focus on consolidating evidence from different African contexts and using this evidence to inform policy and capacity building. We also a platform for sharing best practices in nature and climate action. Currently, we are leading the State of Adaptation Report for Africa, but also leading a number of other continental studies that are critical. To the question, with regards to the reforms that are needed for NC and nature-based climate action, I think in Africa, from the work we've done, the most critical reform is in the institutional reforms. And in this, there is a real need for bottom-up frameworks, while there has been calls for aligning action to the needs of communities. In many interventions, what we see is that there are no clear frameworks that could connect these particular levels. So if you look at how some of the ecosystem or resources are actually operating at the local level, you find that local communities, they interact with these resources. Let's talk about forest resources. In reality, a single forest can be a source of food, a source of fire, a source of resilience, a source of several SDGs. So they have the practical experiences of how this biodiversity and climate action interact. So that reality is important for policy. However, if you look at the macro level in terms of the national level policies, what we see is that a lot of the national policies are inspired by the global frameworks. And so there is that top-down sort of a focus whereby the global frameworks influence what is in the national processes. Then the national policies, tries to bring down actions to the communities. So it is important to really bring up some bottom-up frameworks that could really support a much more stronger linkage between what is happening, the realities on the ground, and the national processes. And these national processes are actually supposed to be the steers for the global processes. The other reform I think needed within that space is multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral frameworks. As I've said, the local level situation is quite seamless, the way communities interact with these resources. But when you go to the national level policy, you realize that the policies that are governing these resources are quite sector-based. So we have almost, for instance, in Kenya, about 5 policies and strategies that are looking at biodiversity conservation. We have the Wildlife Resource Management Act, we have the Forestry Act, and all these operate in isolation. So interventions designed from such a disintegrated policy scenario basically cannot be effective at the local level. So there's need for multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder frameworks that basically ensures that the different sectors are brought together in an integrated way. And I think that is one thing that our BioCam project is trying to pursue. There are some progress that we can mention. For instance, Kenya, in the year 2024, we launched the national biodiversity coordination mechanism, which is basically aiming to bring the different sectors that are linked to biodiversity together. And that is a step that perhaps could be strengthened and could also be replicated in most countries. And finally, ideal is the aspect of financial reforms. We've done some work looking at effectiveness of climate action and biodiversity in East Africa. And what we see, or what we found, is that a lot of the funding for these actions at the local level are grant-based, short-term projects that basically follow what I would call community development approaches. And these are not very sustainable. So there is need to begin thinking about innovative financing for nature-based climate action at the local level. There are a number of innovative instruments, I think, that are already in the space. But what we see in Africa is that these instruments are not properly institutionalized in the financial frameworks of these countries. Again, countries are still not ready in terms of their systems to be able to adopt these particular instruments. So there is need to move towards strengthening that financial institutionalization to adopt innovative financing that can sustainably support action for biodiversity and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It's very insightful, and indeed, thank you for reminding us of the importance of a multi-sectoral collaboration, the importance of finance, but also how local initiatives can influence and should influence both national policy and global processes. So to really just rethink the top-down approach to policy. Thank you, John. It's very, very insightful indeed. And so my next question is now to Hannah. Hannah, based on the work that you do, how can the Global South knowledge improve action in tech?
Thank you. I really want to build on what my colleagues have said, because what they're saying is not just relevant to climate action in the Global South, it's relevant to every single country. So in my work, I studied the IPCC, and I've studied participation in the IPCC and really the complexity around developing countries being able to meaningfully participate in this kind of global scientific exercise. But I also, back home, I'm working with local upland farming community. This is farmland that's kind of categorized as low economic value. And we're experiencing all the issues that have been identified. Farming is targeted within biodiversity through agricultural policy making. Farming practices are the target for increasing biodiversity, mitigating climate change, reducing emissions. So they're really seen as a really important sector. But they are themselves under so much pressure, they feel like they're losing their community. And, I'm working with a group of scholars from Brazil on a project that's called Camp Amazon. And what I'm finding is I am learning more about how to do this kind of community project, to work out, how you bring this range of different stakeholders together, because they already have so much practical experience of this that simply doesn't exist in the community that I'm working with, of being extremely activist, of working out together in the community, okay, what is it we value, what is it that we need. The problem, of course, is that their knowledge is not recognized as a valuable form of knowledge into the agricultural policy making, which again relies on relations. So what's I think really important is that the experiences are kind of that all my colleagues have spoken of, that this becomes literature and knowledge that can be assessed in the assessment, but also that we really rethink the science policy model. So what I try and the reason I really started working with the farming community was trying to understand how their knowledge inputs into this new policy making. Well, what I found is it doesn't input. It's not even recognized as knowledge. When I sit around with policymakers, I ask them, okay, so what do you need to know from the farmers? And they look at me as if, what do they need to know from farmers? Well, they need to know how they work on the land, how they relate to the land, how their policy is going to affect their relationship with the land, how instead of improving the climate action, it may actually degrade the local environment. So for me, it's really understanding the science policy model and how that can change.
Thank you, Hannah. Indeed, very, very interesting insights, and the importance of recognizing local knowledge and the knowledge of practitioners working on the ground is extremely important. So I'm going to ask a second round of questions, and this time I'm going to ask our panelists to give us very crisp, short, 1-minute answers, and I begin with Fidel. So Fidel, so you talked to us about the transboundary collaboration. It's absolutely fascinating, and the way the collaboration brings together the initiatives from a bottom-up perspective and with a focus on communities. Based on your experience then in the GVTC, can you share how integrity is defined in the context in which you work? And how it can be safeguarded? Very short answer, 1 minute.
Well, answering that big question of integrity is actually in 1 minute is challenging, but integrity is understood as a concept that is transcend some level of transparency, encompassing integration of the vision and the needs of the people. It also encompasses the level of needs from the ground. So for us, we think that high level of integrity is actually crucial for the advancing of this concept of nature-based climate action, because it has to be integrated into, it has to really sustain both ecosystems as well as social systems as well. So we would like actually to have this concept in a way that is bring up the needs of the communities to sustain their livelihoods and also not to disrupt the ecosystems in a pervasive way. I think in a nutshell that's what I think, but it has to come with the capacities to the institutions to be institutionalized and also to be able to deliver on the promises that it carries in itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Fidel. Thank you indeed. So we heard about the landscape-based approaches, and my question now is, what steps could align national policies with the global processes under the Rio Conventions on climate change, biodiversity, and land?
Well, it's also a big question too, but in our experience, well, we have been working on develop practical indicators, no, that track how we can track NBS contribute to ecosystem services and resilience, and how it contribute biodiversity and also in the human well-being. Also, I think that is we have to think how we can ensure that what is done at the local level is recognized and connected with national frameworks and monitoring reports. No, that's like a big challenge that we have now. And also, I think that what I heard with the colleague said, also how we can strengthen the governance, local governance, and like for us in our country that we work in Central America is we have a weak local governance and municipalities and how they can make decisions. So for us it's a big challenge, and we are working on how to strengthen capacities to develop more they can report also the different local actions that they making.
Thank you, Andrea, and that brings me in fact to my next question to Johannes. And Johannes, we heard the importance, in your view, from Aaron's perspective, the importance of local actions influencing government policy as well as global processes. Now, in your view, how could governments better work with communities then to align the needs and expectations? The floor is yours.
I think there is need to put in place enabling conditions for that to happen. One is to invest in capacity building. A lot of times, capacity building has been advocated for in terms of developing bankable projects, which I think is great, and we need more of that. But again, from the experience we've had in Africa, is that we need a lot more capacity building at the local level for local communities, for them to even understand their needs. We have been implementing this project called locally led adaptation metrics for Africa. And when we started, because we are focusing on co-creating indicators with local communities so that we can strengthen the local voices in the national and global decision-making processes. But when we started working with the communities, we realized that there was a big gap. A lot of community groups and members didn't even understand what adaptation is all about, leave alone even beginning to work with them to design indicators. So in as much as we talk about aligning to the needs of the local communities and giving the local communities a chance to have their voice, I think they are not still well prepared to be able to do that. So in that case, there's a gap. There's always someone who represents them in some way. And that's a problem. So they need to strengthen that local capacity so that we're able to have effective local systems that can connect to the broader policy systems. Number two, I think, just to emphasize the issue around evidence and indicators. There has been a lot of advocacy of community voices, but there is a gap in terms of packaging that voice to align with the global and national thought processes. So indicators could be a way to really try to bridge that gap. And that means a lot of evidence around that area. We are doing some work in Africa. We have a platform called locally led adaptation metrics for Africa, where we are trying to bring in interventions to learn from each other across the continent. So then building up into the process. Now we have the global goal on adaptation, and there are many issues. I've been following that in the negotiations. There are many questions that are actually facing the indicators that have come out. So I think that is something that need to be looked at, how we build those bottom-up matrices to align with global process. And finally, I think we need opportunities and spaces for sharing best innovative practices. there's a lot going on in different contexts, but certainly because of lack of visibility, we've done some work with Sanda on visibility gap for cooperative climate actions, and we realize that a lot that is going on do not find their way into the table to enable investments and spending. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It's hugely important. Capacity building and extremely important visibility. Absolutely. Thank you so much. My next question, and to wrap up the panel discussion, is to Hannah. So Hannah, we heard about underrepresented knowledge and the importance of recognizing better these local knowledges. How could the Rio Conventions help the global processes?
That is again a massive question for a minute.
1 minute.
And to be honest, I don't have a good answer because it's really a practical question. Where there are still so many gaps in our understanding about the policy making models within each country, it's different. In the project another project I was doing, we were trying to understand the uptake of knowledge, for example, internationally and nationally. And the international process of the IPCC report was actually quite easy in the sense that there is an international process that you can go and watch here, and we're there. And we could observe the global stocktake, the first global stocktake along that process, and we could understand through that, how IPCC knowledge was traveling. It's much harder when you go down to the national level and where there is huge variation in capacities to participate in the process. And the thing is, participation is how the knowledge travels. So, it's a national delegate that goes and participates in the IPCC, participates nominating experts. That's how they get close to their expert community. So we have to understand these processes so much better so that we can see how, on a very practical level, we can help communities build their understanding of what their future is in terms of climate adaptation, and that becomes a form of knowledge that can also then be shared with other communities so they can learn and gain from it. So I'm sorry I can't give you a really nice meat, but I think my colleagues here have lots of good ideas.
That's great. Thank you, Hannah. And indeed, thank you to all panelists for sharing their insights, specific perspectives. And now I pass the baton back to Sander for opening up the larger Q&A.
Thank you so much. A fantastic input from our panel, but your job is not done yet because we will give the audience now the chance to ask questions. And I see a question here at the back. I will come over to you. And we will take some questions and then we will invite Rama, who just joined us, to speak also on behalf of the high-level champion.
Yes, good morning, thank you. My name is Katharina Kalbitz. I'm a master's student here at the United Nations University. And my question would be regarding the joint liaison group, which already exists between the 3 Rio Conventions. What kind of discussion you would like to see in this group? Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to react to that? And otherwise, I think Idil is very well positioned.
I can react very briefly. We've been working on proposing a policy coherence across the Rio Conventions, and I'm going to be very brief. I think more coordination is, as important as ever. The Joint Liaison Group has been around for a long time, and we would encourage definitely strengthening, maybe giving more mandate to the liaison group to achieve the policy coherence that would be needed for synergies between climate, biodiversity, and land degradation. And of course, we can continue this discussion, but we feel very strongly, of course, as a group, to make sure that there is policy coherence at the global level, to connect with global level.
And I think this group also developed, well, I know this group also developed recommendations concerning that and written a public letter on it addressed to both the UNFCCC Secretariat and the CBD, right? All right, yeah, I see a question here and another question there. I've seen you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for all the information. Very useful. I'm Aya from the Philippines. I have a question for Andrea. That you mentioned that you've been developing indicators for how NPS contributes to all the good things that we want to achieve. And I was wondering if those are shareable and where I could access, I don't know, examples or some of the things that you've tested already. Thanks.
Thank you. And this is a question for Johannes.
I wanted to add something comes in on the similar process between the issue. And very quickly, I think it connects to this question around indicators. You know, synergies between different conventions or agreements don't just come because people have sat together. There has to be connectors between those particular conventions. So I guess developing indicators that really speak to the three areas, I think, is one of the ways to purposefully bring these conventions to work together. It might not be in all the areas, but there's some specific connections that can be leveraged on, and I think that's what our project, the Biocamp, for that we're doing, is trying to bring up from the bottom, linking to the broader perspectives.
Thank you, Johannes. Andrea?
Thanks for the question. Well, we start working on indicators. We start with El Salvador. We started working with them this year, and we start to first, like we said before, to understand what is the linkage between the ecosystem services with the different sectors and how they depend on them and how they're interconnected. So based on that, we are propose indicators, also based on the experience of the country, and also we are co-developing this process with the ministries of El Salvador. So we are working on, so we can share the information, but it will be great to share them. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. I think I saw another question here. Yes, please.
It's quite nice to fix with the current discussion on indicators. I think it's kind of how how you do the scaling up, but also the scaling down. Because I think and I'm thinking particularly because this SB Summit on the Global Goal Adaptation and it is being discussed as we speak. How did you see that happen at different levels? Because at one point, as we saw, you can mushroom into millions of indicators, which could be meaningless. So how do you see this kind of multi-level governance of scaling up? Because you have to, thinking of finance, but you also have to scale down so that it's meaningful for the community. So your insight would be great.
Thank you. Who wants to react to this question? Scaling down.
Do you want to go?
Well, very interesting question actually. I've been thinking about this for quite a while. In our system, governance system of GVTC, for us, we also deal with different levels, from government to technical to the grassroots. That's the levels we are dealing with. But we also deal with the global scale. So it's actually Johannes has already mentioned that there is a really challenge actually to connect these different levels, and we are also facing these challenges in our practical work we do on a daily basis. So our challenges stem from particularly the fact that we need to have more transparency in systems. We need to have more democratic participation of the different particularly the communities from the grassroots level. And we need to actually to have can I put it? We need to have a system that allows the different levels to connect and the governance and the to be institutionalized. It's not easy. It's not easy to take a policy that has been developed at the global level and really to need to make it down to the grassroots level and to make it owned by the communities. And it's also not easy to have these communities taking the initiative and really make it at the global level. So it's still a very huge challenge. And in our experience, we also face it as mentioned.
Thank you, Fidel. So if there are more questions, please hold them. Because at this point, I would like to invite Ramiro Fernandez, a good friend actually, because we know each other for more than 10 years. At the very start of the action agenda, the Lima Paris action agenda that we worked together on with. But we're 10 years later now, and we are still talking about the action agenda. At the same time, we also, at least I'm very encouraged to see that the COP30 president is really taking this very seriously, and we saw in the letter, the fourth COP presidency letter yesterday, how important the presidency considers this bottom-up action and to track it, and not only to have more initiatives, but definitely to hold them to their commitments. I'm very pleased to have Ramiro here, and thank you for making it with the taxi also. The floor is yours. Do you want to stand, Sid?
I stand here, don't worry, don't mind. The first thing I say is sorry, I want to apologize. If something I learned this morning is that if you put Kimini Zimmer in your Google Map location, your team does that, you're going to end up in a hotel in Bonn and not in the conference center. So that's why I'm doing closing remarks and not opening remarks at this stage. So apologize for that to all of you. And I do have to say it's been really good for me to do the closings because I was very inspired by hearing you on seeing the lessons learned that you shared on the action agenda in many of them. I'm going to add one more lesson there, and also your conversation about bottom-up approach, multi-stakeholder governance structures that we need, the challenges between knowledge, policy, and the global processes and the synergies. And if I think there is one way in which we can help to combine knowledge, action at the local level, national policy frameworks, and the global Rio Conventions, it is through the action agenda. If something we learned with Sander in these 10 years, meaning we're 10 years older, not 10 years later, by working on this action agenda, it is that action in many cases always precedes it and goes ahead of what we know and understand, and it ended up in the policies and the agreements in the conventions in many ways. Let me try to show you how the role of the climate high-level champions has been trying to contribute, particularly on this intersection on nature to address the climate crisis. Nature action to address the climate crisis. Champions there, as you know, some of you might know, they were appointed in Paris 10 years ago with a mandate to accelerate action and enhance ambition. And the role the champions took on enhancing action on nature, it's been from the very beginning, at the structural level, at the core of our work. Working with the Marrakesh Partnership, we developed pathways to 2030 and 2050 back in 2019. This reflected in what you might hear about the breakthroughs. You have breakthroughs on oceans, the mangrove breakthroughs, breakthrough for forests, for food systems. All of them have 2030 targets and goals, and they're starting to develop different KPIs. And they're a coalition of different entities and actors delivering action towards under these breakthroughs and goals and commitments. So this has been at the core. But in 2023, the high-level champion appointed was Rosanna Mubarak, who is also the president of IUCN, and she particularly wanted to make a lot of focus and contribute in this intersection nexus on nature and climate. And through her work, we encourage businesses to start defining, integrating nature-climate action in their transition plans. So with a campaign named Nature Positive for Climate Action, and more than 1,000 companies today, they have clear nature KPIs in their transition plans on climate. She also wanted to strengthen and encourage the role of indigenous people and the stewardship role they play, not only providing an additional space and platforms within the UNFCCC process, but also accelerating direct access to finance in many of these situations. And now we are working with indigenous people organizations on developing a global data knowledge report. So capturing the knowledge and the reality of how indigenous peoples are addressing the climate crisis from their perspective. But she also managed to get into one room, the heads of states of Brazil, France, Kenya, and Germany, and agree on global agreements on forests in Dubai, which was one of the major outcomes on forests. And finally, the reflection that you see on nature and the global stocktake, and the reference of the synergies of the Rio Conventions is part of her legacy as well. So there you can see how through climate action and having a role of the champion, you can combine all those different efforts. Direct action from local actors to strengthening the Rio synergies in a decision text for the first time under these processes. That is there, and so that is one of the examples. And I do think we are in a pivotal moment to build on that on the way forward. First, because both CBD and UNCCD have a much stronger action agenda in their COPs last year. In the case of the UNCCD, particularly recognized and having the biggest COP under UNCCD since it was started, and this is still growing. There are platforms currently going, and presidency is working behind that. But also, as Sander said, through the leadership of Brazil, Brazil is taking serious steps on being brave, I would say, making this integration between nature and climate real and vivid. And all of us are gonna, or many of us who might be in Belém later this year, we're gonna see that in real life and experience local communities' roles there. But as Sander mentioned, Brazil also wanted to suggest this mutirão as a framework, as a way to bring all actors of society working together. And this mutirão concept that is inviting all of us to work, it particularly has a new shape under the action agenda and the fourth letter of the presidency that was presented yesterday, related and showing how Brazilian presidency is aiming to bring the action agenda under the leadership of the climate high-level champions as a structural component to accelerate the implementation of the outcomes of the global stocktake. So now we are, after 10 years, we are now moving the action agenda that was started as a series of side events on the sideline of the COPs or the climate summits into one of the key critical pillars to implement the outcomes of the global stocktake. And that is a unique opportunity. You might even heard is the concept thereof, do we want to set up a global determined contribution? You consider the global stocktake as a global determined contribution, as the goal, the agreement of what we want to achieve in the next 5 years. That is part of the provocation. The letter that the presidency presented yesterday and the work we are starting from now to November, it is structured on the 6 axes, that many of them are nature related: ocean, waters, biodiversity, forest, agri-food systems. Many of them are nature related, and we are currently building on the breakthroughs and the work of the pathways, setting up the targets and the goals for 2030 and the KPIs that we're going to need for that. And I think this, and this is for the closing, this offers a unique opportunity for this ecosystem and community working on data from the local level to the global level. And we are in a moment where we can use all the different technologies from IA, all the information technologies that we have, like, I don't know, Map Biomass in Brazil, and many other platforms, with the local sort of knowledge and expertise that we can bring, and make that all part of the reporting on progress under these specific 30 key objectives that we are setting up for Belém. So there was a QR presented yesterday in the high-level event, and you are all invited to provide your submissions and recommendations and be part of this action agenda towards Belém. So I hope this will set the tone for the action agenda for the next 10 years, where I hope we don't see each other talking about climate action anymore, and Sander, and others are taking this baton forward. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rama. And we don't have to answer everything in this meeting, but we can take it forward. One is a question to us all, like, what would you like to see from the action agenda? Yeah, and Rama, I also understand there will be a consultation, right, on the future of the action agenda. Yes. When will it open, or?
I hope we present the work program next week, and
okay.
That's where the consultation starts.
Okay, because I think this is also an invitation to all to consider, like, how you would like to see the action agenda being improved as we go into the future. The other question I want to leave the high-level champions team with is, what can we do for you? We have a growing ecosystem, like of people engaging in the action agenda, engaging in tracking climate action, in analyzing, in indicators, etc. So we are also very happy to learn, like, how we can help the champions team, the co-presidency, and ultimately the better integration of non-state action in a way that delivers on the global stocktake and the priorities that come from it. Are there any questions left? I think we have 2 or 3 minutes left. Yes.
And thank you so much to the panelists and for the high-level champion. That was really fascinating. I have a question on how we do this on a very practical level. The power of the action agenda in building up political momentum is incredibly clear and incredibly vital, but it's also clear that we need 2 tracks. We need a political action, we need an action agenda that builds momentum alongside a political and technical track to enable synergies on a policy level all the way from the multilateral down to the local, and one cannot succeed without the other. So I'm curious about, how do we ensure that the synergies agenda in Belém doesn't just say near the negotiations, but goes into the negotiations? And how do we find a space for synergies within the negotiation space at Belém? So it's kind of a question for everyone, but it was building on a few comments, and also the comment on what would a joint work programme look like, how would it operate? So it's a question on how. Thank you.
Thank you for the excellent question. Rama, would you like to briefly comment?
Happy to, unless the experts, like you are the expert guys, if you want to comment. But just to say from our perspective, I would say from the action agenda perspective, and if you look at this from a city perspective or a company perspective, there is no difference on Rio Conventions. When you're taking action on nature or on water or on climate, you are responding to the 3 goals of the Rio Conventions in different ways. And businesses don't differentiate this is my response to the CPD, this is my response to UNFCCC. They design the strategy and their plans in a much more integrated way. So from that perspective, it's a lot more fluid. And that's why it's good to see how the progress we have been seeing on recognizing the action agenda in climate is now also gaining strength and interest on how action is recognized under CBD and under UNCCD. So that is one part. On the formal track, fully agree on that, and there is already recommendations that, based on the UAE, to strengthen action and more integrated action from the national perspective. And there's a lot more that should evolve, and I hope the indicators reflected in CBD now are reinforced in Belém this year, and that then you move forward. But my experience is that negotiations comes always a lot much slower than reality and political elements. So I would encourage us to move forward the action and the policy in the national levels, and then negotiations will end up reflecting it someday. Sorry for that.
Okay, so as we wrap up, I would really like to thank all our panelists and Rama and all of you for engaging in this very important and very dynamic discussion, I think. We, as a group, as the organizers of this event, we invite all parties, non-party stakeholders to support joint work collaboration under all Rio Conventions and to work with initiatives like Achieve, BioCam and Canada in enhancing integrity, transparency and transformative outcomes. And if you would like to learn more about our work, please don't hesitate to contact us. We also have a link here to the data which helps us formulate the lessons learned from 10 years of climate action. Thank you very much. Have a